Welcome to Think Tank's Session Leader training course. This is the module 3, and it's about building a collaborative agenda. During this module, we will introduce you some of the most important principles for how to execute professional collaboration sessions. We will more specifically go into a couple of tools. First one is the pre-planning methodology that gives you an overview of what normal steps we take during preparation for a session. We will talk about the planning session guidelines and the model called 6 Patterns of Collaboration. This will give you at least some insight as to how to engage in effective collaboration sessions. You will of course not be a professional collaboration engineer after this little introduction, but you will have some of the key tools and principles available for your use once you plan a session. There will also be an opportunity for you to download some of our templates that you can use for agenda design. Let's get started. First model is called a pre-planning model, pre-session planning overview. It basically talks about 3 steps that needs to be taken before a session is executed. First step is the objectives and strategy, which basically include 3 key activities, which is simply defining the purpose of the session, more specifically defining the deliverables or specific work products or outputs of the session. And the third one is to decide what type of people are needed for the session, how much time are allocated for the work, what other types of assets and resources are needed. Second, we do session planning. That consists of 5 different activities or key activities. First of all, we typically design the actual agenda and collaboration process. After that, we select different types of procedures for how to execute the planned agenda. Third, we look at how we can build Think Tank to support the session. We then look at other tools that are needed for executing the session. And last but not least, we create guidelines both for the participants and for ourselves as leaders of the session so we can effectively execute the session. Third step in the preparation is practical planning. But as a professional facilitator, you've probably done this a number of different times before. So what we're going to focus on here would be key principles for how to do the objectives and strategy and for the session planning. The first thing we're going to look at is the way you actually plan the objectives and strategy. What you do more specifically here is that you have to define the goals or the objectives behind the meeting or the session you're engaged in. These are typically the values that you're seeking getting out of the actual session or workshop, meeting, or whatever you are using collaboration for. It typically also includes a set of background information of what has led up to the formation of this session or the decision to run the session or the workshop or the meeting. So a little bit of background information. There's typically also explained different types of issues that we have in the current situation that makes it necessary for us to meet and collaborate in order to get the work product done, and of course the value of what we actually will gain or who will gain what once we have completed the task at hand. Secondly, we need to define deliverables. Deliverables definitions are not just the same as the objectives. Deliverables are concrete, typically physical description of what we need to have in our hands, what we are done. Is it one list? Is it one page? Is it in English? So all the specifications of what is actually needed. That's the results. The output is specifications of what type of formats do we need to use. The scope has to do with how much do we need to complete. Is it 1 page? Is it 10 pages? When is it enough? And then when we talk about deliverables, we also talk about deadlines. When does the work product has to be delivered, in what format, to whom, at what date, and one time. The third objectives area is resources. And first of all, we need to define who we need to participate in the collaboration, what roles and responsibilities should there be in the group. Secondly, we have to decide what kind of thinkers or participants we need in the session. We usually look at the roles and responsibilities, and based on that, we select people that best can cover these roles and responsibilities. Third decision is about who needs to lead or who will lead the session. Is there one leader? Would there be more leaders? So who are leading the efforts? And then last but not least, we talk about what investments are we going to make in terms of time, resources, and money. What is the right amount of investments to gain the values or the goals, to reach the goals of the session. These things should be in an objectives and strategy description. If you want to know more about these elements, I suggest you download and go through the session planning guidelines that has a list of these things that you see here and an explanation of what I've just told you, what needs to be done during these different steps in the checklist. With the strategy and objectives done for the session, then it's time to go into the session planning. And the first step of the session planning will be to define and outline the agenda. Normally, we talk about choosing a method of approach. So what is the general method of approach to the session? What are the major phases that needs to happen in the actual session? Then we talk about each single module or each single phase. What is that supposed to contain? What is the objective of each phase? And how do they fit together with the others? And we make a short description of the purpose for each method or the deliverables if there is a specific deliverable for each module. There normally is, because that's how a good output is getting produced for a collaborative session. Now, once we have the overall agenda, we then look at how the different elements in the agenda are going to be delivered. That's what we call building blocks. So for each of the agenda points, each of the modules, if you want, in an agenda, we define tasks for each step of the agenda. We talk about the appropriate goals that are needed, the patterns, so what actually needs to happen, what type of collaboration will we do during each, again, agenda module. We decide what type of group setup we're going to use. Is it a planetary setup with everyone talking at the same time? Or are we going to do breakout groups? How are we going to organize the group? And then we decide the duration of the different tasks that happens during a certain agenda point. The third step is to consider the techniques. So once you've defined the agenda, you planned every single specific building block of the agenda, then a decision is needed for how you are going to deliver the different building blocks. For professional facilitators and collaboration engineers, you will know the concept of thinklets, which are different pre-specified techniques, delivery techniques for how to deliver different things during an engagement. This is what we decide at this point in time. Or we describe the techniques of how we will deliver the different elements of the content of the session. The fourth planning area will be to create a think tank session that can deliver on the agenda and the building blocks using the techniques that has been chosen. And for this, we do a normal think tank design session where we create a new think tank session. We build the agenda in think tank according to the plans we have made, and we make sure that the session is ready for use by testing it ourselves and with a few participants before the session actually takes place. Next step on the agenda is to consider other types of tools. For running a session, there might be other technology requirements necessary, for instance, internet connection. There might be need for power plugs and things like that. We need to look at session space requirements in terms of how much space, how much area, how many chairs and tables and things like that do we need. We need to make sure that we have the right requirements for the location and the venue in place. If we are doing virtual meetings, we also have to set up an audio channel, which one is that going to be, and other types of requirements and tools necessary for the session. Last but not least, we need to create a set of instructions, partly for the session leaders, that might be ourselves, so we know exactly and feel confident that we can deliver it as planned. We also need to consider support instructions for other people that participates. It could be for session thinkers. So once they are in the session, if we cannot guide them individually, all of them, we might want to create some type of instructions so they can read about what was the assignment, so they know what to do during the actual session. And when that is completed, we will say that we have done a good session planning for a think tank. The next model I want to share with you is a model called the 6 pattern of collaboration. These patterns are the things that actually constitute collaboration. Based on a lot of research, when people have collaborated, they are using one or more of these types of activities. So when we collaborate, we usually generate. So we move from having fewer to having more concepts. Generate can be generation of ideas, generation of information, generation of opinion, generation of options, generation of insights, and so forth. Second type of pattern of collaboration will be organize. It's how you organize information or insights so people can understand them. This is grouping of stuff. If you have 100 ideas, you might want to group them in 3 so you can easily work with them later. Third activity area is clarify. Clarifying deals with how to make sure that we have the same understanding of an idea, a concept, a proposal, or a piece of information. The fourth pattern is called reduce. This is where we look at maybe, let's say, 100 ideas, 100 pieces of information. How do we reduce it to what is the most important for us to use? So that's an exercise of how to reduce the content to what is needed at a certain point in time. The fifth pattern is called evaluate. Some people call it vote. This is where you try to figure out of different types of options, for instance, which options is the better one. It often involves some kind of decision making for the evaluation. And the last one is called build commitment. It is more a mental pattern that deals with how to make sure that people are committed to working together and to attain the goal of the group. There are a number of different things we do here. We, of course, build goal alignment. We make sure that people trust each other and things like that. All of that are things that engage people and build commitments to the group goal. 6 pattern of collaboration. Now, how do we use this one? Well, basically what we do is look at the agenda and the building blocks in the agenda and make sure there's a logic sequence in how people move through the collaboration. A problem that might be in certain situations is that if we generate a number of ideas of what to do and then invoke the generation principle, and then move directly to evaluation to say, all right, so when maybe a vote about what of these 5 ideas is the best one, then we might get into problems with the quality of the vote. First of all, if there are certain issues that are not clear about different options, and we haven't clarified them, that means that people actually evaluate options on different preconceptions about what that option contains. So that's one of the normal problems we get. If we don't build commitment before we do an evaluation and a vote, then we might have people in the group that are not committed to the decisions of the group. So that's what we usually do, and that's how we use the 6 pattern of collaboration to make sure that our collaboration process is effective. The last principles we'll share for this time is about how to plan the horizontal and vertical logic of your session for the agenda. So basically you can consider the agenda of a session, the red arrows on top of the screen. So you first plan out which agenda points you need, step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then for each of these agenda points, you plan the modules, you plan the tasks that needs to happen. And then after each agenda point is done, there's a transition from the last activity to the first activity of the next module. And this one can be used in many different forms and formats. This is an example of this being used where we actually have described an agenda based on this methodology.